so boring.
You're not finished yet. We have to finish this project by next week.
Well, it doesn't matter anyways. You spoiled the ending when you were mourning a death about a horse.
Hey, Boxer was my favorite character. It's not my fault you're a slow reader. I finished the book and even wrote the majority of the notes, unlike someone.
Gosh, words can hurt, you know. I mean, well, I can't believe you say that about me.
You're not even reading your book.
Oh my gosh, you know what? Why would you say that?
I'm already doing all the work. It's
I
not my
Guys,
fault.
calm down. We're not gonna get anywhere if we keep on arguing. And plus, I think I have a better understanding of the story than you all do.
Oh, really? What were the animals building throughout the story?
A windmill.
What happened when Napoleon came to power?
He created a society where the pigs have more power while the other animals are stuck working in harsh conditions.
What's it about?
It's a political fable based on the events which occurred during the Russian Revolution, as well as during Joseph Stalin's betrayal. The story highlights various events in the revolution through allegories, which reveal important ideas such as the structure of society and being informed. Boom, I finished the book and understood it while you guys were sitting around arguing.
Well, if you're so smart, answer the one question we have to answer for this project. Why was the CIA involved in the making of the film?
To make it more anti communist.
Well, if you know so much, then lead this project.
I will.
Then go ahead.
Anyways.
The events that occurred in the novel mirrored those that occurred throughout the Russian Revolution, and with changes being made in the film, the truth was slightly altered, so that the CIA could portray the message that they were attempting to achieve against communism. This ultimately caused the movie to act as a form of propaganda.
In order to understand this, it is important to analyze the context of the film through the historical perspective. The connection between the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the CIA-funded film can be shown in a brief comparison. In the late 18th century, Tsar Nicholas II came into power, and around the same time, Karl Marx's idea of communism surfaced. Essentially, it argues that the means of production should be collectively owned by everyone as opposed to individuals. It wanted to abolish social classes and believed the economy should be entirely controlled by the central government.
This is displayed in Animal Farm through Old Major, who informs the animals of his idea of animalism and becomes vital in sparking the overthrow of humans. In 1914, Russia was pulled into World War I due to the alliance system, resulting in war fatigue and food shortages. Nicholas was held responsible for the failings of the war, and in response, Vladimir Lenin formed the Petrograd Soviets. He began calling for the overthrow of the provisional government, promising the Russian people land, food, and an end to the war. Eventually, Lenin decided to use violence, sparking the October Revolution of 1917 and forcing Nicholas II to abdicate. The Bolsheviks seized city infrastructure, including the Winter Palace, the seat of the Russian government.
Lenin then declared to the Petrograd Soviets that the Bolsheviks were now in control, and Trotsky kicked out their opponents. Immediately after, Lenin announced 3 decrees in which promised to put an end to the war, introduced minimum wage, abolished private land ownership, and allowed peasants to divide land amongst themselves. Lenin also brought in universal healthcare and education. This crucial event was depicted through the Battle of the Cowshed, where Snowball, Leon Trotsky, led the rebellion to overthrow Mr. Jones, Nicholas II. Although no one was officially named leader, the pigs naturally took charge. They also began learning how to read and write, writing the 7 commandments on the barn wall.
In the early 1920s, Stalin and Trotsky competed for power as Lenin grew ill and passed away in 1924. Trotsky suggested a 5-year plan which aimed to not just expand the economy but to build socialism. Associated with it was a vast program of new large-scale capital projects that would embody the new society in steel and cement. Stalin, on the other hand, despised Trotsky because of his numerous successes, popularity after the war, and his request to spread the communist ideology to other countries. Trotsky was ultimately a threat to Stalin's vision of communism within one country. Eventually, in 1925, Stalin decided to take control and exile Trotsky. Although in Animal Farm, Old Major, also representing Vladimir Lenin, dies before the rebellion takes place, Snowball is driven out by Napoleon. It is important to note that in the film, Snowball is instantly killed, whereas in reality, he was exiled and moved from country to country, but was eventually killed by a Spanish communist in 1940.
Immediately after Trotsky's exile, industrialization began, but at the same time, a massive famine grew throughout the Soviet Union after farm production dropped. Stalin also used his secret police to confront any opposition which was seen as Napoleon's bloodthirsty dogs. The Soviets also began trading with the West, and in 1939, Stalin signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler, depicted through the timber deal with Frederick. However, in 1943, Germany and its allies invaded Russia in order to gain control of the city of Stalingrad, and despite the victory against the German forces, heavy losses were suffered. The significant event symbolized the Battle of the Windmill, where Frederick leads the humans in an invasion of the farm and, despite destroying the windmill, was still faced with defeat. The end of the movie, however, was twisted to manipulate the truth. It was supposed to reflect the Tehran Conference where Stalin, Winston Churchill, and Franklin D. Roosevelt met to discuss ways to forge a lasting peace after the war. The film instead focused simply on the destruction caused by Stalin and his necessary exile in an attempt to restore peace.
Wow, how interesting. I never knew all those events occurred in the Russian Revolution.
Wait, but can you repeat? In 1943, Germany and its allies invaded Russia in order to gain control of the city of Stalingrad, right? But what does this even represent in the story?
Oh, it represented the Battle of the Windmill, where Frederick led the humans in an attempt to overthrow the pigs. He also ended up destroying the windmill, which the animals worked so hard to build. The CIA changed a lot of events, though.
Wait, there were changes?
Was he always wearing that?
Years passed. The seasons came and went. The short animal lives fled by. The completed windmill stood as a monument to its builder's faith and sacrifice. But the animal's revolution was only dimly remembered. Outwardly, Animal Farm appeared prosperous. But the animals themselves were no better off, with the exception of the pigs and their supreme leader, Napoleon. His pig-run enterprise now had many of the frills of real civilization. And one fine day, pig delegates from far and wide arrived at Animal Farm to celebrate the coming of a new era. When reports of this great change reached them, other animals everywhere were incredulous. Dismayed and indignant, they headed toward Animal Farm from all directions, instinctively uniting once again in common cause.
On farms owned and operated by pigs, there is order and discipline. Our lower animals do more work and eat less than on other farms. This will encourage you to make your lower animals work even harder and eat even less. To a greater animal farm. To peace and plenty under pig rule. To the day when pigs own and operate farms everywhere.
To the animals, it now seemed that their world, which may or may not someday become a happy place to live in, was worse than ever for ordinary creatures. And another moment had come when they must do something about it.
According to Janie Utel, a professor and chair of English at Whitney University, at least 7 different versions of the film script for Animal Farm are extant, all of which demand alteration to Orwell's original ending. The several parties involved in the making of the adaptation called for something more upbeat than the novel's conclusion, wherein the animals resign themselves to their fate, realizing that there is no longer any difference between the pigs who have established authoritarian rule over the farm and the men who were original oppressors. The CIA wanted an ending that would demonstrate the liberation of Animal Farm, with the animals starting a rebellion and overthrowing the pigs.
Thus, with the removal of humans and the addition of portraying Napoleon in the likeness of Mr. Jones, the CIA captures the image of communism through the events that occurred leading up to the end of the film. Furthermore, instead of humans and pigs being portrayed as equals, the remaining farm animals perceive the old ruler in which they had fallen under as Mr. Jones. This changes the message of the movie drastically, as all forms of capitalism are removed from the film. The movie is aimed more to inform the viewers of the negative aspects of communist beliefs and governments.
Additional changes include Snowball's death and the alteration of the flag. By portraying the death of Snowball, compared to his assumed death in the novel, the constant reinforcement of Napoleon's remarks concerning his reputation in return is no longer needed. Furthermore, the CIA could jump straight into Stalin's rule and the theory of Stalinism in order to avoid his rise in power, considering all the propaganda that he had to execute in order to reach his position. The replacement of the flag, on the other hand, allows the CIA to capture the general message of communism, while excluding Orwell's intentions with the messages and symbols of the novel. This contrast of the flag used in the novel which represents the USSR's flag, as Orwell wanted to accurately portray the Russian Revolution.
It is also worth mentioning that various characters were excluded in the film, the most notable being Molly and Clover. Molly is the vain mare who craves the attention of human beings, which causes her difficulty when adjusting to the new regime on the farm. She represents the petit bourgeoisie that fled from Russia a few years after the revolution took place. And Clover is Boxer's faithful friend who often suspects the pigs of violating the 7 commandments, however, ends up blaming herself for misremembering them. She represents the female members of the proletariats, as she is supportive of the decisions revolving around the revolution, but lacks the proper knowledge to further question and oppose the decisions made by that of the pigs.
Wow, that's a lot of changes. Like, who knew they took out so many characters out of the movie? Also, why did the CIA replace the flag again?
It allowed them to capture the general message of communism while excluding Orwell's intentions with the message of the symbols in the novel. After all, Orwell just wanted to illustrate the truth.
So did the CIA think it wasn't anti-communist enough?
Exactly. There are reasons why the CIA's involvement impacted the tone and how the ending ultimately changed in the end. Key events from the novel were altered in the movie, including the ending.
Now that some of the characters have been cut, what happens to the remaining ones?
Well, they become significant and...
Speaking of characters, Benjamin's role is vital in demonstrating the difference between democratic capitalism and totalitarian communism. An effective method of analyzing this is through the Marxist perspective, where one can argue that Benjamin, as well as the rest of the farm animals, represent capitalism while the pigs represent communism. This becomes increasingly more evident in his relationship with Boxer, specifically the scene where he's sent to be slaughtered and the animals, which symbolize the working class, are unable to do anything. With Boxer's tragic death, Benjamin realizes that the animals should not be treated this way, fulfilling the role of Clover, who is removed from the film, thus proving that capitalism is not equal to communism, as argued by Orwell in the novel, because in a capitalist society, citizens have rights, while in a communist society, they do not.
With further analysis of the film through the Marxist perspective, one would spot various differences between the book and the film adaptation of Animal Farm, with a heavier emphasis on the theme of inequality in the film. For instance, Animal Farm's co-operated government between Napoleon and Snowball was originally built on the goal of making Animal Farm a place where the equal rights and freedom of animals are priority. However, as the movie incorporates the death of Snowball, Napoleon steps in to take complete control of Animal Farm. It is at this point where true equality for the animals becomes skewed. An individual comparing the book and the film from a Marxist perspective would identify the shift in the quality of life for animals after Snowball's death. It's important to note that Snowball's death, which is exclusive to the film, can be representative of the complete erasure of true equality, as Snowball was a character who valued the common good for all animals over the importance of self. In addition, the added scene of Snowball's death in the film would help to direct the attention of the audience to the cause of inequality, Napoleon.
Moreover, an observer watching the film from a Marxist perspective would also identify the scenes in the book that were deleted from the film and observe how these changes place emphasis on the idea of inequality within Animal Farm and, more importantly, the Stalin government. By removing certain scenes and characters that represent themes that do not align with the theme of inequality, the film became more centered around the topic for inequity. For example, Clover, who was one of the characters that represents the bourgeoisie class in Soviet society, was omitted from the film so that the focus could be more on the unequal distribution of rights and resources between animals.
That by omitting certain details of the book in the movie and directing attention to the theme of inequality, the CIA funded a movie that reinforced the idea that the Marxist-Leninist theory of communism was ineffective in both the film and real-world Soviet Russia. By displaying parallel examples of inequality in the film with the animals, The film mocks the idea of an authoritarian communist government.
I can't believe that the movie is more grim than the book. The animations remind me of retro Disney, yet it gave such an eerie feeling while watching it.
However, one thing that stuck out was the ending. Although different from the original source material, it gave a sense of hope. Seeing all the animals together to overtake the pigs was something I would never expect, but why would they change in the first place?
Well, if you look back at the time both the novel and the movie were created, its main purpose was to criticize how communism came into power in the Soviet Union.
So, the deleted scenes from the film were important, but how so?
Well,
Wait, I know the answer. By removing certain scenes and characters that represent themes that do not align with the theme of inequality, the film became more centered around the topic of inequity.
hey, are you the leader of this group?
No.
Exactly, so why are you acting as if you are? I'm the leader here, so we're doing it my way.
Anyways, how would you analyze it in a psychoanalytical perspective? Although both the film and the book place emphasis on the negative traits of Napoleon who mirror Stalin, the book aims to highlight the idea that Napoleon and the other pigs gradually adapt the brutal traits of humans, while the film mostly focuses on the violent aspects of Napoleon's authoritarian rule. By centering it on the recurring violence that takes place in the film, it invokes a response of disgust in the audience in regards to Stalin's government. This was done by omitting certain characters from the book in the film who strayed from the leading theme of violence, for example, Molly, who represented the bourgeoisie class. While the film aims to highlight the austerity of the Stalin government from a psychoanalytical perspective, one can also see that the film itself was a creative yet highly effective way of communicating an idea about the Soviet Union. Not only did the cartoon style of propaganda catch the attention of a variety of audience, especially younger ones, it was also accessible by many Americans. Furthermore, the flaws of the Stalin government could be identified much easier by viewers when they have a satirical film to compare it to. A cartoon in comparison to speech propaganda was much more refreshing and memorable to American citizens.
In essence, without the modifications, the book argues that anti-communism and corrupt capitalism consist of the same theory with the same end goal, displayed through the ending with pigs and humans, limiting political, social, and economic growth. Susan Ryan, a writer for Cineast magazine, concludes that Orwell was valuable to Cold War propagandists because his commitment to social democratic ideals made him seem like less of an anti-communist fanatic and therefore more palatable to liberals and leftists. Thus, by altering specific scenes from the novel and modifying the characters, the CIA successfully and effectively fulfilled their goal of turning Orwell's Animal Farm into an outlet that sends a purely anti-communist message.
So that's it?
Yeah, so that's why the CIA was involved in the film. Now we can finally finish this project.
Hey, Nathan, you've been acting strange ever since you took lead on this project.
Yeah, you basically dismissed my thoughts and ideas earlier as if they were not good enough compared to yours.
It's as if you were Vladimir Lenin.
What? No, that's ridiculous.
You've been treating this entire group project as if we were the animals in Animal Farm and you're the pigs.
You're basically Napoleon.
That's insane. There's no way I would become someone like Lenin or Napoleon. Unless... Oh no. What have I become?
Beast of England, beast of Ireland, beast of every land and clan, hearken to my joyful tidings of the golden